Hi, Maria. I'm really pleased to have you for this interview for actually Pilgrims, a teacher trainer journal. And
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure having me meeting with you again and talking about my interests and
yeah,
sharing my experience with your readers.
yeah, and I'm really interested. I think we're kind of giving this an overarching title about your story, so or
Yeah,
actually stories. So, but let's see where your stories go. Okay.
yeah, that's
So
true.
so
Yeah.
just to begin, if you could tell me a little bit about your early learning background and what brought you to your current roles in English language teaching.
Um, to start very, very early in my teaching career is I started teaching when I just finished high school. So when I was 18 years of age, I went around schools in my hometown and I asked the principals if they are interested in hiring teacher, a substitute teacher. So there was this very experienced director, principal and assistant principal, who said, well, actually, we do need some people who need to take over some classes. So that was my first experience as a teacher. I didn't know much about teaching. I didn't know much about planning. It was during the communist times when you had to follow the directives of the party. But I really enjoyed it. And I had the um, very I had the honor and uh, uh, luck, if you want, to work with a very experienced team and a very mindful team of teachers. So they taught me a lot of things. They said, well, if you encounter this particular situation, this is what you should be doing. So from then on, I thought, well, this is maybe the career that I would like to pursue. So I applied for a program with linguistics, a languages training program that had a teaching component after 1989. And I studied my languages training as well as my teacher training with the University of Bucharest. And I graduated, and then I thought, well, maybe I should pursue teaching and education even more. So I took a master's in communication strategies. Fast forward a few years, 1999, we were getting ready to immigrate to Canada. And I thought that it would be easy to transfer my skills from Romania to Canada. And then I realized it's not the same type of teaching. So I started taking workshops. I volunteered a lot in different settings, schools, and then I thought, well, maybe I should take some training. And I discovered this program at Seneca College in Toronto that had adult education, an adult education component, and it was preparing people to become teachers of English as a second language. So I entered the program. It was my light bulb moment, if you want,
Okay, good.
because that's when I discovered
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah,
the right
yeah.
way to teach. So
Okay,
I'm jumping the gun a little bit here.
yeah, yeah. Which is
Yeah,
fine, and
yeah.
let's come back to light bulb moment in a bit. Yeah, there.
Hmm.
And I just wonder if you just say a little bit more about your early experience in terms of Romania and in terms of the approach, because I think I live next door to you actually in Sofia,
Hmm. Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I taught there, and which was a very interesting experience as well. But we won't go into that today.
Yeah, yeah.
But I just wonder what do you think are the both perhaps the drawbacks or and the kind of positives perhaps of your early experience.
The drawbacks of my early teaching experience was that you had to follow the party line. So whatever you taught had to be approved by someone. The positive was that being a substitute teacher and being so young, I was allowed to make mistakes. And every time I felt like I made a mistake, I would go to my senior colleagues and say, well, this is what I did. Was that the right thing or the not, the wrong thing to do? And the other positive thing is that the principal and the assistant principal of the school, they were very understanding people. They supported me a lot. Every time I had a question, I would go to them. And perhaps that was the moment when I realized that, yes, I want to be a teacher and I want to be like them. I want to um, support those who are new to the profession. The most interesting part was that I was just a few years younger than my learners, and that made it so much easier to build a rapport between myself and them. There was one time I taught, so I was just 18, 19 when I started teaching, and there was this eighth grade young woman who actually came to me and said, "You look so young. You sure you're a teacher?" So it was a very interesting experience, and it was nothing like the learner experience that I had when I was in school.
Okay, and you made this reference to kind of elders. I mean, can you say a bit about that? Was that the kind of senior staff that supported you, or is that something
Yes,
else?
yes. Well, first it was the senior staff that helped me um, understand what the requirements of the profession were. Going back to them every time I had something that was kind of challenging or I didn't understand, or even making a lesson plan, because you had to prepare a lot of lesson planning, and the paperwork was absolutely horrendous. But then when I started teaching in Canada after I finished my teacher training, the elders that I refer to are those senior teachers that have been teaching not just English as a second language, but they came from different backgrounds. And those are the ones that, in a way, helped me understand what a teacher needs to do in order to prepare their learners for the life outside of the classroom, basically.
That's good. So would you say they had quite a positive, what you might call mentoring role with you?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. One of them specifically, who had been a teacher for about 45 or so years, he was the go-to person. Any teacher, beginning or experienced or senior, would go to him and ask him, "Well, Gord, what do you think about this?" And then, of course, he would have a joke for us. He would have some comments, would criticize us. So I was really, really lucky to have met him. And there was a whole group of senior teachers when I first started teaching adults in Canada that influenced the way I taught many years down the road.
Yeah. So am I hearing from what you're saying that this kind of mentoring role is much less of a, this is the way to do it, or even to advice, but it's a kind of sharing of ideas in many ways as well, in that role. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what I've been trying to do with my younger colleagues. Every time someone came to me and asked, "Well, how did you do this?" I would say, "Well, this is how I did it, but what do you think?
Mhm.
Let's put it down and, kind of break it into little pieces and then put the pieces back together and see, would this work for you?" Because sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's really dependent on your teaching preferences, on your learning preferences, on your group of learners. There's so many variables in when we go into a classroom. There's so many variables that we need to take into account.
Sure. And yeah, and that point I think we'll come to a bit in a
Mhm,
few minutes as well.
mhm,
You also talked about life of teaching in the real world. Just wonder if you
mhm,
could expand on that.
mhm.
Yeah.
Well, when I was in school, we were all preparing to go to university or college. So the learning that we did had to have something to do with the exams that we had to pass at the end of school. Whereas my teaching was mostly focused or more focused on preparing my learners for either the workplace or for their life outside of the classroom. So I would provide them with support, not just linguistic support, but support in so many aspects that people don't think we actually do support our learners. We are social workers. We are family members, surrogate family members. We are mothers and friends, and sometimes we give advice when we shouldn't be giving advice, but they come to us. Learners come to us and ask us, "What can I do? What should I do?" So the real life is what we should be preparing our learners for. By example, that's how I feel. That's how I believe. By leading, a life that focuses on the positives, and when you struggle, you learn from your struggles and you persevere. But also, we need to prepare our learners for the 21st century. which has so many different approaches than when I was in school, and perhaps when you were in school, and when my parents were in school.
Okay, and let's come back to that idea about the light bulb moment. I think our readers and viewers would be quite interested in what that means for you. Yeah.
Well, there were actually two light bulb moments. The first one was when I realized that being a teacher or becoming a teacher was what I wanted to do. That was the path that I wanted to pursue, and I was ready to do anything and everything to become a teacher. And then the second light bulb was after I took the courses in Toronto, and I realized that what I had been doing wasn't 100% right, and it wasn't 100% preparing my learners for the real life. So I took a step back, I took a few steps back, and I started looking at, well, what would I want to learn? What would I want to have in my little, I don't know, baggage to prepare me for as many situations in the real world as possible. So I started talking to my students. I started asking them, well, what would you like to learn? I would start my needs assessment with, what would you like to learn? Well, I'm here to teach you. What would you like to learn? And they would say, well, everything. Well, we need to narrow that down. So what would be the very most important thing that you would like to learn today? And we would start, making a list. And then that list would turn into a few points, and then we would start looking at what's most important for everybody in the classroom, or for most of the people in the classroom. So it was, for me, it was that aha moment when I thought, well, I wish I had a teacher like that in my classroom. And I promised myself that that's the way I will be teaching from this moment on.
Okay, and does that link to something else you've mentioned about caring for your learners and showing it? I just wonder if you could give an example of what you mean by that.
Well, I will go back to when I first started teaching adults, and I was a little bit apprehensive because that was the first time I would step up in a classroom of adults. So I would have, I had all my plans ready, and I had all my lessons, nicely photocopied, put them in a binder. And then all of a sudden, this gentleman stands up and says, well, I have to leave. And no warning whatsoever. And I said, well, why? Why do you need to leave? That particular moment when I asked him why was like a, what, you need to know? Why do you need to know? And I said, well, I don't need to know why you're leaving, but is there something I can help you with? Maybe you can stay longer. And what had happened after that, every time somebody had to leave early or they had to go someplace, they would put their hand up and say, teacher, may I please leave? I have to. So I thought, well, I don't ask you to give me details about why you need to leave the classroom. I just need to make sure that you are safe out there. There's something, you just need to go to the washroom, perhaps. I don't know. But there may be something that you need, like a phone call that you need to answer. So caring and showing that you care for your learners helps build a rapport and makes teaching and transferring the information so much easier, because it creates trust. It builds the trust between you as an educator and your classroom and your members of your group, better than you preaching that, today I'm going to teach you how to solve the problem, the existential problem of something, and so on. So showing that you care for your learners. When someone comes in and they're always happy, or when they're always chatting, and all of a sudden they come and the demeanor has changed, asking them the question, well, what happened? Taking them aside and say, are you okay? What happened? How was your day? That makes their better, and makes their day better. And that's how I have been teaching, and that's how I've been building the rapport and communicating with my learners.
Okay, and perhaps there's an issue there for them and the other learners in the classroom as well. Absolutely. That same sort of trust and care for each other
Absolutely.
is what builds
Absolutely.
that rapport as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like I said, we need to be the role models, and the role model as an educator role model needs to show compassion, needs to show empathy, needs to show understanding and support. Otherwise, we should not be in this profession.
Okay, I'd like to move on to the work that you're doing as well around your approach to actually what's been called multiple intelligences or multiple
Teaching styles.
Well, I actually think that's a much better way of looking at it, actually, because as you probably know, it's that the concept from actually Gardner has received quite a lot of critical feedback not just recently, in the last 4 or 5 years, actually, yeah. And the question's been asked about whether there's enough there is enough or even any evidence to actually prove the kind of multiple intelligences. But let's take it from your approach, which I think,
Okay.
and multiple teaching, I think, is a better way to look at it, actually. Yeah.
Yes. Well, when I started looking at different ways of engaging my learners, I first and foremost looked at me as a learner. So I thought back, well, what was it that I really, really liked in what my teachers showed me and encouraged me to do? And what is it that I hated? And then I asked myself, well, why? Why did I not, or did I dislike so much this particular lesson or type of teaching or style of teaching? And that's when I started figuring out that it wasn't the type or the style of teaching, it was the way the teaching was done. So the way the teacher would patronize you, like, I know it all, and I'm going to teach you so that you know it all, or well, no matter how much time I'm going to teach you, you're not going to be able to learn it the way I did. So through trial and error, I started using these methods based on emotional intelligence, learning preferences, and multiple intelligences. And I started to try figuring out, well, why this particular group does this task better and why this other group struggles with it. And that's when I started kind of finding my own idea and understanding of how do you teach, say, pronunciation to a group of learners who come from a certain background. Then what would be the struggles that you should encounter? Is it important? Is it relevant? So the multiple teaching styles and the multiple teaching methods and methodologies really look at the context of teaching learners of all backgrounds, including the special educational needs and disabilities learners, and how to integrate their needs into the planning. Not only that, but it allows you to reduce your planning time and your preparation time significantly so that you actually focus on teaching and looking at different resources, finding different resources. And that is what plagues our teaching, our profession. The time that we have to spend preparing, finding the resources. And it's not reinventing the wheel. What it is gathering all the information that you need at the very, very beginning of your career, keeping it organized so that it's easy to go back to. Use only those specific pieces of information that you need for that particular group, and then come back and assess and reassess and reassess.
Yeah, I mean, would you be able to give an example from a kind of teaching lesson of what this multiple involves? Yeah.
The first example that comes into my mind is teaching sciences. And let's say we have a lesson in chemistry where you have to teach some experiments. You have to show some experiments to a group of learners, and you know that there are some learners that have special needs. They need someone to help them understand the instructions, but there could be someone in your class that you don't know about that is sensitive to sounds or to flashing lights or to other unexpected reactions in the classroom. Well, if you prepare or if you plan so that that particular learner is protected or is warned and prepared to see a flashing light or hear a popping sound, will make it easier to continue with the lesson, as opposed to having to interrupt and find a way to calm down the learner, or perhaps have someone in the classroom to take them out, and that interrupts the learning process and the teaching process.
Okay. How would you answer the question that somebody say, well, this sounds really interesting, but that there are kind of risks here because you don't know what's actually going to happen in this lesson. The more you kind of begin to understand your different learners, and so you've got to be ready to do things in different ways.
Well, as a teacher, you should not be alone in the classroom. You should have support from the administration. You should have support from your peers. You should have support from your learners. And well, people will say, well, yeah, but what can I do with 5-year-olds when I have this learner who's afraid of popping sounds or who's afraid of going up the stairs? Well, education starts at a very early age, and it should start at a very early age. We should teach our children, and the youngest they are, the easier it's going to be down the line, that we are all different and we all react differently to the same popping sound or the same noise or the same event. The moment they understand, they will be willing to help you out. And I've witnessed children as young as 6 looking after their peers, looking after that little boy who's afraid of getting the stair, getting up the stairs, holding their hand, coaxing them. And you as a teacher don't need to do much aside from getting ready and delegate. There are a lot of teachers who do not delegate, don't know how to delegate, and don't know how to use their learners around them to share in the process of learning and teaching.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I wonder if you could. I mean, we're kind of near the end of the interview now, but just wonder if you could say a little bit about your company, about the 21st Century Educators Limited.
Yeah, well, the company was founded in November 2021 when we relocated to the UK. It's a teacher training company. It's focused on providing professional development to educators in all fields. It has a component of communication strategies and cultural intelligence, cultural understanding. I have been promoting, and I've been presenting at conventions and conferences, teaching conferences in Canada, and that company has relocated here, or I relocated that company here, and that's what I've been doing, and that's what I will be doing here in the UK. I am very happy to have a group of business coaches and advisors that have helped me put it together, and soon we will expand. The plan is to start a teacher training center here in Rotherham in South Yorkshire with a communication strategies component, probably in the new year.
Okay, and I mean, I imagine there is a reason. I mean, you mentioned already about what's in terms of learning and teaching in actually 21st century. Which is obviously the name of the company as well.
Yes.
I just wonder, just as we're closing, if you could say a bit more about what that actually means for you. Yeah.
Well, we need to be ready for this new century, and we need to be ready to accept that technology is going to stay with us, that we need to change the way we perceive our learners, the need we need to change the way we prepare them for the life outside of the school, life outside of the classroom. And since we live in the 21st century, the changes in educational systems around the world will have to adjust so that they keep up with the new century that we are living in right now. So that's why I thought 21st century educators is the appropriate name for the methods and methodologies that I am proposing and that I'm encouraging teachers and educators, generally speaking, to look into.
Okay. And just lastly, a quick question. If there's other kind of teacher trainers who are kind of embarking on this teacher trainer, teacher educator kind of world, I don't like to call it advice, but any kind of suggestions you might give, from your own experience. Yeah.
Well, if I can, give a suggestion. You're right. Advice, it's a little bit I don't know, patronizing, if you want. If you do want to go into a teacher training direction, be yourself and don't be afraid to stand up for what you believe in. That would be my motto, if you want.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's great, and I really enjoyed our time. Yes.
Yes, me too. Thank you very much for having me, Phil.